Hello, friends. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reportedly offended former US President Donald Trump again, though not recently. This happened much earlier, back when Ukraine was still receiving military aid from the United States. Trump compared it to taking candy from a child, calling Zelensky both a smart and tough guy. In a new interview, Trump criticized Zelensky once more, accusing him of being ungrateful. He claimed that the US had given Ukraine approximately $350 billion in aid, while Europe contributed $100 billion. Meanwhile, the current US administration is putting so much pressure on Ukraine that even Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov expressed surprise, saying he could hardly believe what he was seeing and hearing. Tomorrow could be a pivotal day, or nothing may change at all, as an important meeting is set to take place in Saudi Arabia. Both Ukrainian and American delegations will be present, and the US is also expected to hold separate discussions with Russian representatives. President Zelensky will travel to Saudi Arabia as well, but it remains uncertain whether he will meet with the Americans. Zelensky stated that tomorrow's visit is part of ongoing efforts to bring peace closer. Meanwhile, it's clear that ordinary people are providing Ukraine with more military assistance, such as kamikaze drones, than the US government itself. Russian forces are now trying to develop new electronic warfare systems to counter these drones. However, as the saying goes, there can never be too many drones. The speaker urges supporters to contribute financially to ongoing efforts, providing donation details in the video description. He also strongly encourages viewers to subscribe to his channel. There's a possibility that Ukraine and the US may sign a deal on rare earth minerals during the Saudi Arabia talks, or they may not. Trump, however, has claimed that Ukrainians are not demonstrating a desire for peace, whereas he portrays Russian President Vladimir Putin as a peacemaker who supposedly wants to end the war. While Trump speaks about Putin's willingness to negotiate, Russian propagandist Vladimir Solovyov is openly discussing the idea of launching a nuclear strike against the US. Despite such threats, American officials seem more focused on pressuring Ukraine than addressing Russian aggression. Trump appears indifferent to Ukraine's fate. When asked whether he is okay with the idea that Ukraine might not survive, he dismissively responds that it may not survive in any case. Although he frequently speaks about his sorrow over the loss of life, it was under his directive that the US halted the supply of air defense systems to Ukraine. When questioned about why the US is withholding Patriot missile systems and what will happen once Ukraine runs out of these missiles, Trump dodges the issue, insisting that he needs to be sure Ukraine actually wants to negotiate peace. While Trump applies pressure on Ukraine, he does nothing to challenge Russia. When asked whether he would impose sanctions or tariffs on Russia, he avoids giving a direct answer, only mentioning upcoming meetings in Saudi Arabia. Given the current trajectory, it seems likely that the US will continue using its influence to pressure Ukraine, and further military aid may not be forthcoming. Even if a minerals agreement is signed, Washington might still find another excuse to withhold assistance, much like how US Senator J.D. Vance recently complained about being confronted by Ukrainian protesters, claiming they frightened his 3-year-old daughter. However, footage from the incident suggests that Vance himself approached the demonstrators. Meanwhile, American officials have also begun criticizing another ally, adding to the growing tensions. The focus of US criticism has now shifted to Poland, and it all started with the Starlink controversy. Elon Musk took to his social media platform to clarify that he is not a supporter of Russia or Vladimir Putin. He emphasized that he provided Starlink services to Ukraine and warned that if they were ever disabled, the entire front line could collapse. This statement prompted a response from Poland's foreign minister, Radoslaw Sikorski, who pointed out that Poland pays approximately $50 million annually to provide Ukraine with Starlink services. He added that if SpaceX failed to fulfill its commitments, alternative providers would need to be found. Musk, who is highly protective of his financial interests and contracts, including those beyond Poland, felt compelled to reassure the public. He stated that even if he personally disagrees with certain policies regarding Ukraine, he would never shut down Starlink services. Then, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio entered the conversation, dismissing Sikorski's concerns as baseless. Rubio insisted that no one had ever threatened to cut Ukraine off from Starlink and argued that Poland should actually be grateful. According to him, without Starlink, Ukraine would have already lost the war, and Russian forces would now be at Poland's border. This incident is telling. it highlights that not only Ukraine but also other US allies can no longer fully rely on American support. As a result, Europe must focus more on strengthening its own defenses, or it risks being overwhelmed, since Russia is unlikely to stop at Ukraine. Meanwhile, intense battles continue in the Kursk region. Russian sources claim victory, but their own propagandists contradict these reports. Some messages from the front lines paint an optimistic picture for Russia, with claims that their forces have entered Sudra, surrounded Ukrainian troops, and are now taking prisoners. However, the situation remains fluid. Here's a retelling of the text in different words. At one point, Russian forces attempted a maneuver similar to their previous assault on Avdiivka, this time trying to infiltrate Sudra through gas pipelines. They seemed to believe this approach would be completely safe, but the Ukrainian air assault forces thought otherwise. As soon as the Russians were detected moving through the pipes, Ukrainian artillery, kamikaze drones, and other strike systems were deployed against them. The enemy was caught off guard, and soon after, some Russian propagandists started complaining that the operation had failed due to excessive publicity. Now, no one would be held accountable for the Russian soldiers who suffocated inside the pipeline. Meanwhile, Russian forces are bracing for counterattacks, not just from Ukraine's armed forces, but even from Finland, with speculation that Finnish troops could advance toward Leningrad. While these claims may sound exaggerated, the reality on the ground in the Kursk region remains difficult for Ukraine's defense forces. The enemy continues its offensive, benefiting from numerical superiority, including reinforcements from North Korea. Additionally, they keep key Ukrainian supply routes under constant fire. Despite these challenges, FPV kamikaze drones remain one of Ukraine's primary means of striking back. Many of these drones have been purchased through crowdfunding efforts, demonstrating how critical public support remains. Thanks to contributions from supporters, Ukrainian forces recently received 330 new FPV drones. As US military aid to Ukraine remains frozen and unlikely to resume soon, the responsibility to support Ukrainian defense efforts falls even more on the shoulders of ordinary citizens and donors. Now, more than ever, continued contributions are essential to sustain